This is our cell signaling project where we are going to be covering the signaling pathway of adrenaline. So today we're going to explain the signaling pathway of adrenaline. Adrenaline is an efficient messenger that signals through many cell types throughout the body. This includes lungs, heart, and muscle cells. In this video, we will be focusing on how adrenaline signaling causes our fight or flight response.
Adrenaline is a hormone. A hormone is a chemical substance that can act like a messenger molecule in the body. Adrenaline molecules are produced from the adrenal glands located in the kidney, and they are hydrophilic. To reach the target cell, adrenaline travels long distances in the bloodstream, which is a process known as endocrine signaling, to reach its target cell. The receptor proteins used in adrenaline signaling are G-coupled protein receptors, which are embedded in the plasma membrane of the target cell, making the hormone exogenous. When the adrenaline ligand binds to the receptor, the protein activates and the signal is sent inside the cell. But how does this process work? There are advantages and disadvantages to using G-coupled receptor proteins. Advantages of using G receptor proteins are that they have fast on-off signaling, which permits the organism to quickly respond to changes in their environment. However, because the protein receptor's cellular response is rapid and short, the response is short-lasting and is terminated once the ligand stops binding to the receptor. This is a characteristic all hydrophilic signaling molecules share. When the adrenaline ligand binds to the receptor and activates the protein, a G protein is used to help the flow of the signal transduction pathway. When the receptor is activated, the G protein replaces its GDP with GTP. This leads to the separation of the protein into two different subunits, which the GTP-bound subunit binds and activates the target protein, adenylyl cyclase, which helps trigger an internal pathway inside the cell. This internal pathway is carried out by second messengers, signal molecules that help amplify the cell surface molecule's initial signal. In adrenaline signaling, cyclic adenosine monophosphate, or CAMP, is the second messenger that carries the adrenaline molecule's signal throughout the inside of the cell and amplifies its response to targeted proteins known as kinases. CAMP is made by ATP entering the activated target protein adenylyl cyclase, converting ATP into CAMP. When CAMP activates the kinase, these proteins can help activate target molecules that are initial to adrenaline signal's cellular response. This process, where a small amount of signal is amplified to create a large cellular response, is known as signaling cascade.
So what is adrenaline's specific signal? Well, adrenaline release causes a fight or flight response in the body, which can be shown by increased heartbeat, dilated pupils, trembling, and flushed skin. Fight or flight also causes cortisol releases in the body, which in turn increases blood pressure and blood sugar. Adrenaline releases from fight or flight cause increased strength in the body, and the liver releases glucose, which in turn gives muscles more fuel during the fight or flight response. And you can see here that oxygen, nutrients, and blood flow are being moved to the muscles during this response. What is adrenaline's receptor? Adrenaline's receptor is called an adrenergic receptor, which is a class of G-coupled receptors that target adrenaline. Adrenergic receptors are like special proteins on the surface of cells that can grab onto two catecholamines called noradrenaline and adrenaline. These catecholamines are released when your body's fight or flight response is activated. So these receptors are like tiny grabbers that catch these chemicals and make the cells do certain things in their response, like increasing your heart rate or making you feel more alert. What are the molecules involved in the intracellular response of adrenaline? So when adrenaline binds to adrenergic receptors on the surface of cells, it triggers a series of intracellular responses. These responses often involve molecules like cyclic AMP or CAMP and protein kinase or PKA. Adrenaline binds to adrenergic receptors on the cell surface. This binding activates an enzyme called adenylate cyclase. Adenylate cyclase converts ATP into cyclic AMP. Cyclic AMP is a secondary messenger molecule that helps transmit the adrenaline signal inside the cell. Cyclic AMP activates another enzyme called protein kinase. Protein kinase phosphorylates specific target proteins inside the cell. These phosphorylated proteins can then trigger various cellular responses, such as increased heart rate and release of glucose from the liver. What is the sequence of events in the adrenaline signaling pathway? Well, first, there's an adrenaline release. Adrenaline gets released from the sympathetic nerve endings into the bloodstream in response to stress, danger, or excitement. Next, an adrenergic receptor activation. Adrenaline binds to adrenergic receptors located on the surface of target cells. Next, there's an activation of G proteins. When adrenaline binds to adrenergic receptors, it activates associated G proteins, which are proteins that transmit the signal from the receptor to the inside of the cell. Next, there's an adenylate cyclase activation. The activated G proteins stimulate adenylate cyclase, an enzyme located in the cell membrane. Next, there is cyclic AMP production. Adenylate cyclase converts ATP into cyclic AMP, which is a secondary messenger molecule. Next, an activation of protein kinase A. CAMP activates protein kinase A, which is an enzyme. Next, phosphorylation occurs. Activated protein kinase A phosphorylates and adds phosphate groups to specific target proteins within the cell. And lastly, the cellular response occurs. Phosphorylated target proteins initiate various cellular responses depending on the cell type and location. These responses can include increased heart rate, dilation of airways, release of glucose from the liver, and more. So, what is the intended response of the cell signal? So, the primary intended response of the adrenaline signaling pathway is to prepare the body to respond quickly and effectively to a perceived threat. This response is called the fight or flight response. Adrenal glands in the body produce the adrenaline hormone and send them into the bloodstream to produce this response. It involves a series of changes that enhance a person's ability to deal with a potentially dangerous situation. These changes in the body include increased heart rate, release of glucose from liver, high blood pressure, and more enhanced strength and speed, dilation of pupils, and temporary decrease in pain sensitivity. When the body no longer needs to respond to a stressful or dangerous situation, adrenaline's pathway is terminated and allows the body to go back to its normal state. The sequence of events for termination to occur are as follows. 1. The reuptake or metabolism of adrenaline. Adrenaline is either reabsorbed by the cells or metabolized by the enzymes. This helps to remove the adrenaline from the bloodstream. 2. The breakdown of cyclic AMP. Any remaining cyclic AMP, which is a secondary messenger in the pathway, is broken down by enzymes called phosphodiesterase. 3. Receptor desensitization. Adrenergic receptors on the cell surface gradually become less responsive to adrenaline. This desensitization occurs as a result of continuous stimulation, helping to prevent an overactive response. 4. Feedback control. The body's regulatory mechanisms sense the reduction in adrenaline's effects and adjust the release of adrenaline accordingly, maintaining a balance in the system.